Well, I'm Evan Garmon. I work for Harpenau Insurance Agency, which we are local. Actually, the office is outside of Tell City, Indiana, a town called Troy, Indiana. But I've lived in New Albany most of my life. Now live in Sellersburg, work from my house. And for the past 3 years, I've actually been a drone insurance specialist. So that's something I've picked up. Again, I've enjoyed the hobby myself. I've got a Phantom 3 and another little just racing drone. So a hobbyist myself, just love the whole industry overall. But when we started off, I really wasn't sure where this was actually going to go. The industry again was in its infancy. At least from our perspective, the Section 333 exemption was the only way operators were able to fly commercially and actually make money by flying drones. So again, that all did change in 2016 when Part 107 came out, and that's really what opened the doors for us. We really started expanding from there. One of the things we've seen, though, how many people here are actually using drones commercially? You're in a commercial use. Anybody here? How many would like to make money flying drones? Okay, there we go. So that's the kind of stuff I work with on a daily basis. We have people across the country in all 50 states now that are using drones commercially, making money with them. Even in school systems, we've got a couple school systems we have that have liability coverage on their drone operations. So it is definitely a unique product for sure. Not many people understand what drone insurance actually is, what it entails. For a lot of people, they're going from a hobbyist to starting their own business. Usually the only type of insurance coverage they're ever going to know is usually like a homeowner's, an auto policy. Maybe they've got a friend that has had like a commercial business policy of some sort, but for the most part, those policies actually don't cover any type of drone operations at this time. There are a few coming to the market. Again, as the insurance industry progresses and this market becomes a bigger segment, we will start to see more and more companies being able to offer liability coverage for drones. Right now, the policy we offer is an aircraft-based policy, and this is the most common that's going to be out on the market right now. The aircraft companies have been doing, again, aircraft insurance numbers of years, back to like the early 20s, whenever they first actually had aircraft coming out. So with that kind of momentum, they're the ones that obviously they just were able to pick it up because dealing with the FAA has its own expertise that's required. And when you get into the aviation insurance side, again, the biggest piece here is always defense costs. These aviation attorneys, they're the ones that they'll run up the costs. So it will apply to drones. Right now, we have not actually seen many liability claims that have gone over more than just a couple $100. People hitting cars, maybe windows. There are a few cases that you've probably heard that have hit the news. To our knowledge, we don't believe any of those people have actually had any type of insurance in place. So we are still waiting for a big claim to occur, and that we believe is going to set the precedent, and that'll hopefully give some more carriers some information on, okay, what do we need to look for in our operators to actually get them the coverage they need. And then again, just start offering more and more products. Right now, as we do get a lot more operators, they're going from hobby use into a commercial capacity. They come to us because we actually offer more than just the aircraft policy. Most business owners don't understand that they do have other exposures out there. If they decide to hire a person, maybe do some office admin type work for them, that's a need for workers' compensation. So there are other coverages out there. The biggest one obviously is going to be general liability. This is just your basic business owner's policy. If you have someone come to your premises, they slip, trip, fall, that's the policy actually picks up. A drone policy is really specific to what happens with the drone. If it hits somebody or if the drone itself gets damaged, we could pick that up also on the drone policy. So there are a few things, again, I'll talk about in the drone policy. Liability limits, it's usually the standard. You have to get the liability to actually get coverage on the drone. We've seen right now the lowest limits of liability for most drone policies you're going to see is about $500,000. And that's just because if people do go to the $100,000 mark, that's going to be eaten up usually in a defense cost. And then what are you going to have left over to actually pay the victim or whoever it is that was hit with the drone? So usually $500,000 is the lowest end. $1 million is the most common limit of liability we see for drone policies. Again, no precedent really, but that's just the amount that we feel is going to be about the least amount of protection we would recommend. We actually have had a success in getting a $100 million policy for a gentleman to fly at JFK Airport during normal flight operation hours. That policy did take a lot of negotiation. But believe it or not, we were actually able to get a pricing for 2 weeks for $1,500 total for $100 million in coverage for this guy to go fly at JFK doing a construction operation. So that was a really interesting case that we were able to help out with. A lot of the operators we're working with, I would say the most common unit we see is, if it's not the Phantom 4 Inspire 1s, we are starting to see, or Inspire 1 and Inspire 2s. Those are starting to become a lot more prevalent. I would say the smaller operators, guys that are probably doing it more on a part-time basis where they have a full-time job elsewhere, we're going to see a lot of Mavic units. We've seen a few of the other models, but DJI, again, I would say for 95% of the drones that we're insuring, DJI is usually the top case. Now, we have had a couple clients, though, that are starting to do more of the inspection work. So they are starting to get more sophisticated payloads like LiDAR cameras and sensors. Those can also be covered on the UAV policy if it's actually attached to the aircraft, and while it's in the air, and again, while it's on the ground, not in motion. So payload coverage is another thing we often have to help people with. We've seen values, again, for smaller cameras. We've had people decide to insure GoPros for less than $400 a year, which I don't actually recommend coverage on physical damage for less than $2,000 of value. The reason being, we are seeing a lot more claims, usually due to operator error with the smaller units. So it's just been to the point where there is a lot of hassle going through a claim for a unit that you could just go out and purchase at a Best Buy, even go to Amazon, maybe find it for a little bit cheaper than what you purchased it for just months prior to actually insuring it. So we are starting to see a little bit more of that. But again, some of these payloads, we start dealing with LiDAR units. You're talking about $100,000 up to, right now we're dealing with a guy that's looking at a $265,000 LiDAR unit. He's attaching to an M600, which is another DJI drone. That pricing on the insurance, a lot of people think that it can't be that expensive, but this one specific case, pricing right now is actually about almost $20,000 a year for the drone insurance. And this is the piece where people they can't understand why it should be that expensive to insure these things. The facts of the matter is there are claims happening on the more higher valued units that we're starting to see. To the point where I heard a statistic from one of our carriers that for units valued $25,000 and up, they're experiencing about 1 in 9 claims on those units, which just really is not a sustainable. This is just not sustainable for the insurance side if they're just paying out claims every time and not getting the premium in to justify it. So if you ask me, again, I would say the average rate right now for a drone under probably $3,000, you're going to see between 9 and 10% of the value if you actually want to insure it if it were to crash or be stolen even. That's something else we always get questions on is what's this thing actually covered for? I know it is if I crash it. What else is it covered for? We've had people lose drones in the water where they've not been able to retrieve it. We've had people had their car windows busted in while they're at a job or may have gone into a hotel. Someone steals all their gear out of the car. So we have seen that actually be covered on these policies. The most interesting one that we've had was actually a gentleman who he rented a $12,000 FLIR camera from another gentleman up in Ohio. And when he rented the camera, the gentleman said, you just need to make sure you provide coverage on it. Really easy. We added it to his policy for a 3-day period, $300 of coverage for the whole time, and again, $12,000 total value for what we had estimated. On the 3rd day, the guy gave the camera to his he gave the camera to his intern. The intern dropped the camera on the floor, scuffed it up, really kind of dinged it up pretty bad, and didn't tell anybody, just put it in the box and shipped it back. A week later, we get a call from the owner of the camera saying, we need to file a claim on this. And here I'm thinking as the agent, oh gosh, there's no way this is going to be covered. It's just cosmetic damage to this thing. Sure enough, we reported it up, and it was covered. The repair cost for a FLIR camera to get the casing repaired and everything, it was estimated about $6,500. The replacement of the camera, though, to actually get a new model was $10,000. So at that point, what the carrier did was they said, all right, give us the unit. We're going to pay out $10,000 for a new camera for the gentleman that owned it. And then they just settled it that way. The interesting piece there, though, is the insurer actually had the camera at that point. Again, mint condition camera, just some minor dings, scuffs. Our client was actually able to go back to the insurer and bought the unit for like $2,500 as a salvaged unit and closed out his own claim. So we are starting to see, again, this is the kind of stuff we're seeing going on here. these insurance carriers for these drone markets, they are being, I would say, very generous for a lot of the claims that we are seeing. Again, they're making sure that this industry is going to be something sustainable, but at the same time, they do have to watch what they're doing. So that's why we are starting to see prices tick up. On the liability side, we're actually seeing prices go down. I would say from when we started in 2015, prices have gone down almost probably 45% from where they were for the liability coverage. So when we began in 2015, $1 million of coverage was going for roughly $1,100 a year. So again, that was just the basic startup cost there. After you get your drone, get your insurance, you're looking at $1,100 just right out the gate. We're to the point now where they've started identifying what the intended uses of the drones are, and that's actually giving people some discounts to the point where agriculture and mapping use is being seen as one of the less risky types of operations. Prices we're seeing now for $1 million of coverage range anywhere we've seen as low as $420 a year. To the average, I would say is about $550 a year right now for someone just doing commercial videography, photography, events, and I would say stuff that's more, they view as more risky, events and movie use. So where people are doing stuff around like film sets, that is seen as the more risky type of operations. That does increase the premiums. So we've had people do just events as their only intended use on a policy when rating it up. And you're looking still probably about $700, $800 a year just for the $1 million of liability if you're going to be doing it in just any type of event capacity. So it does help if you had more intended uses to help spread out the cost with some of the policies that are coming out now. But as we also, we do start working with a lot of people switching from hobby use over to commercial use. One of the things I've actually recommended people do is look into the on-demand option. There are a couple different on-demand agencies out there that have crafted special policies with carriers. I know one of the biggest ones right now is the company Verifly, based out of New York. They actually underwrite their policy through Global Aerospace, which is one of the primary carriers we use as well. Their option, again, you'll see on average, they say about $10 per hour of coverage. So if you think about it, it sounds like a great deal. You're just having to pay 1 hour, for 1 hour, $10. What you have to consider, though, is, okay, if you're going to be doing a drone business for the long term, if you fly at least once a week, you're already looking at a break-even situation between the on-demand option versus the annual policy. So it's really, actually what we found is about 35 to 40 hours is where it starts to turn over to be more cost-effective to look at an annual policy. If you could have the qualifications for that. And one of the qualifications, again, is going to be Part 107, having that to do commercial operations. Right now, Verifly, you don't actually have to have 107 to do it. They'll insure it for your recreational use and commercial use. It is recommended, though, if you are going to be flying commercially, to have that Part 107 license. So I want to open it up for questions now, though. Is there anything else anyone wants to know about? Yeah, no, good question. For hobbyists, again, there's starting to become a few more options. AMA has always been the primary, I would say, the primary source of insurance coverage. The other thing to consider, though, is AMA is on it's an excess policy. So if nothing else covers, that's when that policy will come in and actually cover it. For a lot of people, the homeowner's policy is going to be their first line of defense. If you have a home insurer, renter's insurance carrier that has some type of coverage in there for drones, again, this would be something more recent, that would be your first line of defense. And that's going to be just whatever liability limit you have on the policy. Most people aren't going to have $1 million of coverage, though, on liability on their homeowners, renters policies. So definitely having an AMA as a hobbyist is going to be a good option. But again, if you're doing any type of commercial capacity, they really are not going to be the best option for you right out the gate. There are a few other options I know coming to the market, like IDRA, the International Drone Racing Association. They've touted that they've got a liability program. I've actually not been able to look into it, though, to know what the exclusions are versus what coverage is being offered, though. But they do say, again, in their marketing that it's covered for commercial use and hobby use for, again, some kind of lower rate than the average that's out there on the market right now. Again, I can't actually look into it to advise it all on that. I've looked into a little bit of the AMA policies. What you're going to find with the AMA, though, is most people are at it as just an additional named insured on the policy. AMA is still the primary insured on the policy. So what you have to worry about then is their policy. If it lapses or something happens with that policy, then all of a sudden all these members don't have coverage. Now, again, most likely they're not going to let that happen. But not having your own policy, that's just where I would get I get the feeling that it's something that a lot of people don't know about in terms of how insurance works. So again, homeowners policy is going to be the first line of defense if at all it doesn't exclude any type of aircraft coverage or unmanned aircraft exclusively. It should be. Again, you would want to report to your agent, whoever the homeowner carrier is. However, I would be willing to bet 9 times out of 10 that's actually they're not going to cover it. They're going to have some kind of exclusion in there that's been just in the past couple of years. A lot of people started getting unmanned aircraft exclusions onto their policies at the renewals in the past like 2 or 3 years. So that's just something to look for. That's again where you just want to talk to your agent, see what kind of coverage is there. If you find out that hey, there's actually no coverage here, again, AMA or even just look at Verifly for that just base level policy. So it's the most common, yeah. So they do have some pretty good metrics on what those are actually doing in terms of claims. Custom units, they usually do have a little bit of a surcharge on it, just for the fact that they don't know how it's going to operate. Obviously, I mean, DJI's got a big engineering department behind them, so they've got it down pretty pat. But we do see people using custom units, mainly, I would say mainly fixed wings. What we're seeing when we start talking about the custom units, we have had a few people who have designed quadcopters. One thing to consider, though, the people that are making their own drones and then going and selling them, again, we've had a couple people have contacted us. They may make 5 to 10 a year and then sell them off to someone. Something to consider, though, is if that drone is in an accident and the person that you sold it to doesn't have any type of coverage in place, we're willing to bet that the manufacturer is also going to be roped into any type of lawsuit situations. That's not going to be covered on homeowners for sure. Again, that's a commercial venture. Those types of policies, it'd be called products liability coverage. That's where the main thing would pick up. Those policies are pretty expensive to the point where minimum premiums are between $2,500 to $3,000 right now. That's the way aviation insurance, well, aviation in general, just that industry has worked to the point where these attorneys, they're going to get anybody involved that they can. So even retailers of the manned aircrafts, again, we're talking about manned aircrafts mainly, is where this kind of history's come from. And that's what the trends are, is the manufacturer, the retailers, anyone that's designed a part for these units, if there's a failure to it, everyone's going to be roped in somehow for having some kind of liability involved. They see the same being the case for the drone manufacturers as well. Again, the smaller guys, maybe not as much. If you have maybe 5, 10 units out there, chances are, again, just looking at law of large numbers, you may not have as many issues out there as someone like a DJI, Unique, or one of the larger companies out there. So, but again, if you start seeing, okay, this is a profitable business that we can manufacture these units and sell them off, definitely consider the cost of having a products liability policy that actually covers aviation. Because again, a general liability policy for a normal business will have products liability coverage, but it's going to exclude any type of aviation at all, aircraft parts, anything related to that. So it's something a lot of people I think are going to be most underinsured if they are getting into any type of manufacturing capacity and actually selling drones to other people. So definitely. Yeah, so the LLC, that's the most common way we're seeing policies actually be set up and people insuring themselves first is, again, separating out your personal liability from the business liability. That's going to be one of the first risk management keys to not having a claim go against you if something does come up, and protecting your personal assets. But again, I hate to say it's not a guaranteed way. There's still ways that attorneys can shoot holes into an LLC. Again, if you're just using it just really for kind of tax purposes, but you're just the single member operator, really no oversight, but you're acting as a sole proprietorship in a lot of cases, there's going to be ways that someone's going to be able to shoot holes through that. And that's where, again, the insurance policy comes up to protect that. So, all right. Well, I think that's about it. So thank you, guys.